You look at a pristine architectural model for a new skyscraper, right? Like all those tiny, perfect plastic trees, the flawless glass angles catching the miniature light, and it just looks so simple, so clean. It is a vision of absolute control.
Right. But it's an idealized version of the world. I mean, every single element is perfectly in its place, and the underlying assumption is that, well, nothing will ever deviate from the blueprint.
Exactly, but then you step onto the actual construction site, and suddenly that perfect vision is just buried in mud and ear-shattering noise and scheduling chaos.
Yeah, trucks arriving late.
Trucks arriving late, materials missing, people yelling.
Yeah.
The blueprint has to survive contact with reality, and that gap between the idea and the execution is where, most things I believe fall apart.
And that transition from planning to execution it's the most vulnerable point in any operation. You can have the most sophisticated strategy in the boardroom, but if you don't have a mechanical process for translating that strategy into physical action, you just end up with, well, expensive chaos.
Which brings us to today's topic. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to explore that exact gap. We are going to uncover the hidden mechanics of how massive organizations actually get things done.
Right.
We all know what a high-level master plan looks like, but we want to understand how a massive factory or a complex business translates a high-level strategy into hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute execution.
We are dissecting the absolute nitty-gritty of manufacturing planning and control. So we're getting into the ground-level stuff, issuing detailed schedules, managing queue sizes, human resource execution, and capacity planning.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah, these are the granular mechanisms that prevent a multi-million-dollar production floor from descending into that muddy construction site chaos you mentioned.
And the promise here is that by the end of this deep dive, you will look at your own daily schedules, your own bottlenecks, and your own to-do lists entirely differently. We're going to borrow the exact techniques used to run industrial production floors and apply them to how work actually gets done.
It's all about control.
Right, because before anyone can build a product or execute a task, that high-level plan has to be translated into explicit, micro-level instructions. The industry refers to this transition as issuing production orders within the constraints of supply and demand. And the holy grail of this step is something called the shop packet.
Yeah, the shop packet. It is the ultimate execution document. It's gathered during the implementation phase of what we call production activity control, or PIC.
PIC.
Right. And to understand PIC, you really have to look at the broader software systems running the company, like material requirements planning, or MRP.
Which is like the digital brain.
Exactly. It calculates exactly what materials are needed and when based on customer orders. But the MRP assumes a frictionless universe. It assumes every machine runs at its advertised speed, materials always arrive perfectly on time, and, workers never call in sick.
So the MRP is that pristine architectural model on the desk.
Spot on. And production activity control is the boots on the ground. PIC is responsible for taking that pristine digital schedule and forcing it to survive physical reality.
Okay.
And the mechanism it uses to do that is the shop packet. The packet includes the exact start and complete dates, the formal authorization to actually begin the work, and crucially, a physical last check of material and tooling availability before anyone touches a machine.
It reminds me of how a high-end restaurant kitchen operates. Like the executive chef, the MRP in this scenario, designs the menu and knows exactly how many ingredients they bought for the week.
Right.
But you can't just yell, make a banquet for 200 people into the kitchen and expect food to come out. The expediter has to hand the line cook a highly specific prep list and recipe tickets for that specific hour.
Yeah, the line cook needs the ticket, the exact ingredients in front of them, and a clean pan. If any of those are missing, the grand vision of the executive chef means absolutely nothing.
Let me challenge the necessity of this extra step, though. If a company has invested millions of dollars into these overarching software systems, these incredibly sophisticated MRPs, why introduce this manual or localized shop packet bottleneck? Like, can't we just trust the automated schedule to run things? If the computer says start at 8 a.m., just start at 8 a.m.
Trusting the automated schedule blindly creates absolute devastation on a factory floor.
Really? Devastation.
Oh, completely. Because the software assumes the world is perfect, but the shop packet forces a reconciliation between the digital plan and the physical reality. Imagine the software schedules a complex milling job to start at 8 a.m. But when the operator gets to the machine, a highly specialized titanium cutting tool broke during the night shift, and hasn't been replaced.
Well, when the software doesn't know the tool is broken.
The software is completely blind to it. So if the operator just follows the automated schedule and starts tearing down the machine to set up the new job, they pull raw materials out of storage, they take up valuable floor space, they stop whatever work the machine was currently doing.
Just to sit there.
Right. Only to find out 20 minutes later, they can't actually cut the metal. The shop packet's last check prevents a job from launching into a void. It verifies that the resources are actually present, preventing the cascade of delays that happens when you start a job you can't finish.
Okay, so we have our shop packet. The physical last check is clear. The materials and the tools are there. But once that packet is in hand, the work has to physically move through the facility. And movement introduces traffic, and traffic introduces waiting. This brings us to the concept of routings.
Yeah. A routing is the physical map and the chronological itinerary for the product. It dictates the sequence of operations, which specific work centers the item goes to, and the precise time estimates for each step.
Like a subway map for a part?
Exactly. But floor managers don't just act as passive observers watching the map. They actively manipulate the workflow to compress time. One of the primary techniques they use is adjusting batch sizes through something called lot splitting.
Let's break down the mechanics of lot splitting. Because if a factory needs to process a batch of 1,000 units, I think the traditional thinking is that you send all 1,000 units through machine A, and when they are all finished, you move all 1,000 units to machine B.
Which is incredibly slow. I mean, the first unit finishes at machine A in a few minutes, but it has to sit there doing nothing while the other 999 units are processed.
Just waiting.
Just waiting. Only then does the whole batch move. Lot splitting changes the math. You take that order of 1,000 and split it into 2 lots of 500. The moment the first lot of 500 finishes at machine A, you immediately move it to machine B.
So machine B starts working on the first half of the order, while machine A is simultaneously working on the second half.
Exactly. You overlap the operations. By running them in parallel rather than strictly sequentially, you compress the total manufacturing lead time dramatically.
Wow.
It requires more material handling.
Yeah.
You're moving carts around twice as often, but the speed gained is almost always worth the physical effort.
Now, another routing strategy that stands out is the use of alternate routings. And there is a fundamental and somewhat counterintuitive trade-off happening here.
Yeah, alternate routings present a really fascinating dilemma between local efficiency and global efficiency. An alternate routing is essentially a pre-planned backup path.
Okay.
Let's say your main operation uses a state-of-the-art, super fast automated painting machine. But today, that machine is backed up with a massive queue of work. You have an alternate route available, an older, slower manual painting booth in the corner of the factory.
But from a purely financial standpoint, running that older manual booth costs more money per unit and takes twice as much time. Like, it hurts your efficiency metrics for that specific painting task.
It does. You intentionally choose to lose efficiency at that specific workstation. You take a hit on your local metrics.
Why do that?
Because by bypassing a massive traffic jam at the automated machine, the product gets finished and ships to the customer on time. You sacrifice the local metric to protect the global metric. The overall system efficiency is preserved by intentionally being inefficient in one isolated corner.
Taking the hit on the small scale to win on the large scale, I love that. But when we talk about these traffic jams and routings, we run into a jarring reality about how time is actually spent in an organization. The data shows that queue time, which is the time an item spends sitting in a pile, waiting to begin an operation, is often the absolute largest component of overall lead time.
It's massive.
It's not the actual cutting or painting or assembling taking up the days on the calendar, it's just waiting.
Queue time is the silent killer of factory throughput. It inflates lead times invisibly.
But if queue time is just items sitting around doing absolutely nothing but gathering dust, the obvious management solution seems simple. Just force the queue to 0. Don't release the work from the previous station until the next machine is perfectly empty.
See, attempting to force a 0 queue introduces a concept called starvation, and it raises a critical issue regarding machine utilization. If you mandate a 0 queue, the moment a workstation finishes its current job, it looks around and has absolutely nothing to do.
Oh, right.
It has to sit completely idle while it waits for the previous machine to finish its current task and physically transport the next item over.
And idle machines mean you are burning capital without generating output.
Exactly. You starve the workstation. The overhead costs of the factory, the electricity, the rent, the wages, they're still burning, but no value is being created. Managing this delicate balance requires input-output control. or I/O control.
Let's use a tangible analogy for I/O control, because it sounds a lot like managing water through a funnel.
A funnel is the perfect mental model. You have to carefully control the input rate, the volume of work you pour into the wide top to match the output capacity, which is the narrow spout at the bottom. If you pour work into the top too fast, the funnel overflows. That overflow is a massive, unmanageable queue on the factory floor. But if you pour too cautiously, the narrow spout runs dry. That dry spout is machine starvation and idle time.
So the queue isn't a failure of the system, it's actually a necessary mechanical buffer.
Exactly. A carefully managed queue is a shock absorber. It keeps the machine constantly fed, absorbing the little microscopic hiccups and delays in the preceding steps without overflowing into chaos. Floor managers monitor the load from the schedules using I/O control.
And if they see a problem.
If they see a queue getting dangerously large, they don't just panic. They actively increase capacity at the affected workstation. They might reallocate cross-trained staff, authorize overtime, or fire up an alternate routing to temporarily widen the spout of the funnel and drain the excess queue.
Which perfectly transitions into the most unpredictable variable in this entire equation. Because machines, routings, and funnels are beautifully logical on paper. But it's human beings who actually hold the shop packets, turn the wrenches, and clear the queues. Scheduling the people is vastly more complicated than scheduling the metal.
Oh, infinitely more.
Huh.
Setting labor schedules goes far beyond just counting bodies and ensuring you have 50 people clocking in at 7 a.m. It involves sophisticated scheduling software, highly customizable rules, and templates integrated with shop calendars to track, vacations and availability.
Right.
But the real tactical advantage comes from the labor skills matrix.
The labor skills matrix feels very much like assembling a crew for a heist in a movie.
I love that.
Like you are putting together a team to rob a casino. You can't just swap out your elite tech hacker for your getaway driver because the hacker wanted a week off.
No, you definitely can't.
They aren't interchangeable units of labor. You need a matrix to map exactly who possesses which skills, who has the versatility to cover multiple roles if things go sideways, and who is a rookie that requires a veteran supervisor looking over their shoulder.
The heist crew matrix dictates the entire labor strategy. It tracks relative employee skill and knowledge levels, which then informs what kind of scheduling you can actually support. Based on your matrix, you might use fixed schedules, where people work the exact same shift every week.
Okay.
Or you might need floating schedules, where start and end times vary based on daily demand. You could even use flexible schedules, empowering employees to choose their own hours as long as the core matrix of required skills is present in the building during operating hours.
And the management of these human beings isn't just reduced to spreadsheet cells either. The principles of HR management outlined here emphasize the cultural component of execution. Skilled managers are trained to be fair and to view disruptions as problems to be solved, not as immediate opportunities for punitive action.
Right, because the culture directly impacts the physical output. There is a specific emphasis on implementing policies and instructions in terms workers easily understand, explicitly noting the use of the worker's native language.
Yeah. That specific detail stands out because it closes a massive operational loophole. I mean, if the shop packet is perfectly generated by the MRP, but the last check instructions are printed in a language the machine operator isn't fluent in,
then you have a huge problem.
that critical safety valve we talked about earlier is completely compromised.
Exactly. Communication clarity is a hard operational constraint, just like machine speed. And to build that clarity and capability, organizations rely on performance management systems that provide objective feedback. But they also deploy 3 specific strategies to develop the workforce, job enlargement, job enrichment, and job rotation.
Okay, I want to break down the mechanical difference between those 3, because job enrichment and job enlargement often get thrown around as interchangeable corporate HR buzzwords that basically just mean, we are giving you more work to do for the same pay.
Yeah, they do get conflated, but they're distinctly different levers. Job enlargement is horizontal expansion. Let's say you have an assembler who only installs screws. Enlarging their job means training them to also snap the plastic casing together and attach the labels.
So more tasks at the same level?
Right. You are giving them a wider variety of tasks at the same fundamental skill level. Job enrichment, on the other hand, is vertical expansion. We take that same assembler and give them the authority to run their own quality control checks or authorize them to order their own replacement parts from inventory.
Moving up the ladder a bit.
Yeah, it pushes decision-making and autonomy further down the chain. And then job rotation is systematically moving employees through different roles over time.
How does that actually affect the factory floor's performance, though? Is it just about keeping people from getting bored?
In a high-functioning manufacturing environment, job rotation and enlargement are mathematically essential for survival.
Mathematically essential.
Yes. Let's go back to the funnel and the overflowing queue. If a queue suddenly starts backing up at the welding station, you need to add capacity there immediately. But if your workforce is highly specialized, if your painters only paint, and your assemblers only assemble weltee, you cannot help the welders. Your labor pool is completely rigid.
The getaway driver cannot hack the vault.
Exactly. But by heavily investing in cross-training through job rotation and enlargement, the company actively buys flexible capacity. They build a fluid workforce where people can step into different roles dynamically as the bottlenecks shift from machine to machine throughout the day.
That makes total sense.
It makes tackling those unexpected traffic jams infinitely easier. Cross-training is a mathematical capacity strategy masquerading as an HR policy.
Okay, so we have our validated shop packets, we have perfectly optimized queues acting as buffers, and we have a cross-trained heist crew ready to pivot at a moment's notice. We have built the perfect system.
On paper.
Right. But the factory doesn't exist in a vacuum. The outside world is chaotic. A ship gets stuck in a canal. A supplier's warehouse floods. Demand suddenly spikes 400% overnight. How does this optimized system handle external uncertainty?
Well, the foundation of handling uncertainty is having a formal exception management process. When a disruption hits, you cannot rely on ad hoc panic. You need a predefined, structured escalation matrix.
What does that look like?
Step 1 is identifying the deviation. Say, a supplier announces a critical component will be 48 hours late. Step 2 is quantifying the blast radius, which specific routings and shop packets will be starved of material.
Oh, mapping out the damage.
Right. And step 3 is generating alternatives based on pre-approved parameters.
Yeah.
Do we authorize an alternate routing? Do we split a lot? This process relies heavily on robust, incredibly transparent communication with suppliers.
Because burying the bad news just amplifies the damage.
Exactly. Early communication actively reduces lead times and overhead costs. If a manufacturer tells a supplier a week in advance that they're going to need a rush order, the supplier has time to adjust their own internal funnels and queues.
Makes sense.
But if the manufacturer waits until the day before to demand the parts, they pay a massive premium, and the supplier has to throw their own factory into chaos to deliver.
Speaking of the dynamic with suppliers, there is a mechanism called Vendor Managed Inventory, or VMI. Given unpredictable demand, VMI shifts the burden of managing inventory levels entirely away from the manufacturer and places it squarely on the supplier. The vendor decides when to restock the factory's shelves.
Yeah.
Now, I don't buy that a vendor just takes on the manufacturer's inventory burden out of the goodness of their heart. What is the actual financial leverage there? Why would a vendor assume all that administrative risk?
It sounds incredibly one-sided until you look at the mechanics of the broader supply chain. The vendor assumes the inventory management burden because, in exchange, they receive guaranteed business and direct, unfiltered visibility into the manufacturer's actual, real-time consumption data.
Wait, why is raw consumption data valuable enough to take on someone else's workload?
Because it eliminates the bullwhip effect.
The bullwhip effect.
Yeah. In a normal system, a manufacturer sees a tiny spike in customer demand, so they order a little extra from the vendor just to be safe. The vendor sees that inflated order, assumes a massive market surge is happening, and ramps up their production drastically to be safe.
Oh, I see.
A small ripple of demand at the front of the chain becomes a massive, destructive wave of overproduction and excess inventory upstream. With VMI, the vendor isn't relying on the manufacturer's panic-inflated purchase orders. They are looking at the digital sensors on the factory floor, seeing exactly how many units are being consumed per hour.
So the vendor gets perfect data. They can plan their own factory schedules without the guesswork.
The vendor eliminates their own overproduction risk. And the manufacturer benefits immensely as well. They get lower inventory holding costs because the vendor keeps the supply incredibly lean, and they have a drastically reduced risk of stockouts during demand spikes because the vendor is watching the consumption data in real time.
That sounds like a win-win.
It is, but the primary limitation to VMI, however, is the laws of physics. These rapid, data-driven changes are still ultimately constrained by the supplier's physical manufacturing capacity and the contractual agreements in place. Perfect data doesn't allow a vendor to ship 1 million units tomorrow if their factory can only produce 10,000 a week.
Right, you can't cheat reality. So we've run the floor, the shift is over, the queues are cleared, the exceptions were managed through the matrix, and the vendor is restocking the shelves based on real-time data. How does leadership actually know if the day was a success?
Metrics.
They need hard metrics to grade the system, which brings us to capacity planning performance indicators.
You cannot manage a system you aren't measuring. The operational metrics are broken down into 3 distinct categories. First, you have external or customer metrics. These measure the ultimate outcome. Are we performing to the promised schedule? What are our objective customer service ratings? Did we experience any stockouts where a paying customer couldn't buy what they wanted?
The real-world results.
Exactly. And most importantly, what are the quality defect rates? Because doing it incredibly fast but entirely wrong is a net negative.
So then you look inward.
Yes, you look at internal or financial metrics. Are there unbudgeted increases in costs, such as authorizing massive unplanned overtime just to clear an overflowing queue? They also look for a specific glaring red flag. Orders decline due to lack of capacity.
Oh, wow.
If a company is turning away paying customers because the factory is simply too full to take the work, the capacity planning process has failed at a strategic level.
Turning away revenue because you can't organize your floor is the ultimate failure. But there is a third category, operational metrics. And one specific indicator listed here completely flips conventional business wisdom on its head. The metric to watch out for is excessive utilization levels. Because I have always operated under the assumption that the fundamental goal of industrial capitalism is to achieve 100% utilization of your assets. If a machine is running 100% of the time, it's generating ROI 100% of the time. Why on earth is high utilization treated as a negative performance indicator?
This is perhaps the most profound counterintuitive insight in the entire mechanical framework. The natural assumption is that 100% utilization is the holy grail. But if a manager actually runs every single machine in a factory at 100% utilization, they will systematically destroy the organization.
Wait, really? Walk me through the mechanics of how being perfectly busy destroys the factory.
Go back to our discussion about funnels and queues. Not every machine in a factory runs at the exact same speed. You will inevitably have a super fast automated machine feeding a slightly slower, older machine downstream.
Right.
If you demand 100% utilization from the fast machine, it never stops working. It just keeps processing parts and pouring them into the funnel.
And the slower machine downstream cannot possibly keep up with that volume?
Exactly. So the fast machine creates towering physical piles of work-in-process inventory, WIP. You are deliberately clogging the queues we spent so much time learning how to control.
Just piling up.
You are tying up the company's operating cash and half-finished metal that is just sitting on the floor gathering dust, waiting for the bottleneck to eventually clear. Achieving 100% utilization in a non-bottleneck area is literally just the act of creating traffic jams on purpose to make a localized spreadsheet look good.
Wow. But surely you want 100% utilization on the bottleneck machine itself, right?
Even there, running the entire system at absolute maximum capacity leaves you with zero protective capacity.
Protective capacity.
It is the strategic safety cushion. We discussed the inevitability of chaos, the broken cutting tool, the delayed supplier, the worker who calls in sick. If the entire system is redlining at 100% and an exception occurs, you have zero slack to absorb the shock.
Oh, I see.
The machine stops, the heating backs up instantly, and that delay ripples through the entire factory floor, making every single downstream order permanently late.
It's like traffic on the highway. If the highway is 100% full, one person tapping their brakes causes a 10-mile traffic jam.
That is exactly it. High utilization means zero flexibility. Master planners purposefully build in idle time a protective capacity cushion so they have the bandwidth to sprint and catch up when things inevitably go wrong. If your utilization is constantly near 100%, your system isn't efficient, it's brittle, and it is about to snap.
Let's step back and look at the architecture we've uncovered today. We started with a microscopic reality check of the shop packet, proving that the master plan has to survive the reality of missing tools. We mapped the physical floor, realizing that queues are not just wasted time, they're vital shock absorbers, provided we control the funnel.
Right.
We deconstructed the human element, revealing that cross-training a workforce isn't about HR morale, it's a mathematical strategy to buy flexible capacity, like assembling a versatile heist crew.
And we explored how sharing risk and raw consumption data with vendors through VMI eliminates the devastating bullwhip effect for the entire supply chain.
And finally, we learned how to measure the reality of the floor, shattering the myth that being busy 100% of the time is a virtue. Which brings me to a final thought for everyone listening to this right now. I want you to think about your own calendar. Think about your work week. If the world's most brilliant supply chain and manufacturing experts agree that running a machine at 100% utilization leads to disastrous queues, zero flexibility, and eventual system failure,
Why do we try to schedule our own daily calendars at 100% utilization?
exactly. We treat ourselves with less strategic foresight than a factory manager treats a metal press.
It's so true.
We book back-to-back meetings with no breaks, perfectly optimizing every single minute on our digital calendars. We build a pristine architectural model of our day, and then one meeting runs 5 minutes late, or one urgent email requires a response, and the entire day collapses into a muddy construction site.
The traffic jam starts.
We create our own massive, suffocating queues of unread emails and half-finished tasks because we left no protective capacity. Next time you are feeling overwhelmed by your schedule, remember the factory floor. Even a multi-million-dollar production line purposefully builds in idle time to handle life's curveballs. Stop trying to be the flawless, pristine blueprint and start strategically managing the messy reality you actually live in. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.